Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar with We've Got This WA series. I'm very excited to have this discussion today. I'm Sari Childs, the Executive Director here with Business Health Trust, and I also work with the Seattle Metro Chamber. Thank you so much again for just taking time to listen to the experts from the various organizations that we've gathered together today. This series is designed to bring tangible resources from experts to organizational leaders as we all navigate a pandemic and prepare for a new normal. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Symmetra, and from Business Health Trust and the Seattle Metro Chamber for putting this together at no cost for all of the participants. A few webinar logistics before we get started. If you need technical help, please use the chat box. If you have a question for the speakers during the presentation, please use the question and answer box or Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. This will allow us to track these and make sure that we get to as many questions as we can during the presentation. We will also be recording today's webinar and we'll post it on the Seattle Metro Chamber event page later today. Well, with logistics out of the way, I would love to introduce our panel moderator, Katie Drucker from Madrona Venture Group. Katie, welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, so, we're going to have a great conversation today around, returning to work, resources, and the toolkit. Madrona has really done a huge lift that I'd love for you to talk about a little bit of putting together a toolkit for returning to work. Tell us a little bit about what it is and how did this come about?
Sure, absolutely. I think that as a firm, the culture of Madrona has been very much oriented around support and work for our portfolio of companies in the greater community for business entrepreneurs. And I think what that meant for us is taking a look at, in this particular time that we're at, what did the businesses need for the most support? And as I've said before, navigating what it means to reopen the workplace is an incredibly daunting task that for many companies without thousands upon thousands of employees or lots of resources is a challenge. And so we wanted to help and to do our part. And as I keep saying, make sure that we're all on the right side of history and trying to do what we need to do.
Yeah, so could you talk a little bit about the guiding principles that for reopening the workplace a little bit?
Absolutely. As we keep saying, and as a lot have heard, so our webinar was not about when to reopen, but it was about how to reopen. And a belief is that the more informed we all are on the how, it will help to positively affect our when. And in doing so, also wanted to take the approach that said, look, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We've all heard that until there is widespread testing and a vaccine in place, we will all be living with the realities and challenges of the COVID virus. And what does that mean? And putting safety of our employees and our customers first, and what do we need to do? And so it was with those principles that we began to attack the problem. And what we wanted to do also was to say, look, regulation may sit somewhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is what's going to keep us all the safest. There's a difference, for instance, between being compliant and being safe.
Right.
We set about to really try and find out what the best practices of our region were from the companies that we saw in the area that were absolute leaders, either because of their global experience or because they were deemed already essential. And they'd been out there in the trenches dealing with all of this. And fortunately, we live in a pretty remarkable place in the world in which the culture of sharing and openness and trying to help one another exists. And the companies did exactly that. So we tried to distill those findings down and make them very actionable for everyone else.
Great. Well, thank you so much for giving us just a little bit of a snapshot. I know at the end of our conversation today, you're going to go into a little bit more depth and some visuals of what this toolkit has, but I encourage everyone tuning in today to take a look at the toolkit after this and really put it to work for your business, for your organization. Lee Jacobson did put the link to this in the chat box so everyone can take a look. So with that, I will turn it over to you to invite the panel forward as we talk about our topic today.
Terrific, Terry. Well, I wanted to introduce to everybody, so as I mentioned before, we went out and we interviewed over 15 companies in the region. Many of them have names there that you all should recognize, and talked to them and asked questions that one might never imagine speaking to executives about, but all of whom had really insightful, thoughtful answers. We've invited onto the panel today 3 of the folks that we really just enjoyed speaking with immensely, both for their candor, their spirit of cooperation, and most importantly, their deep knowledge. They come from companies that have been doing a lot for the region, whether it's procuring PPE, helping with logistics, doing thought leadership in getting back to work. And in that same spirit, I wanted to introduce the panelists. We have Teresa Hudson from Microsoft, Pat Callens from Costco, and Tiffany DeHaan from Alaska Airlines. We also have Ephraim. Are you with us, Ephraim?
I am.
There you are, Ephraim Fasaha, who is a entrepreneur and a small business owner who has done a fantastic job of continuing operations and reopening his business as well, to speak to the group about his experiences. So with that, I'd like to ask you all maybe to each comment on your current roles in your organizations and where your area of focus is. Maybe Pat, you could kick us off.
Sure, happy to do that. Pat Callens, I'm Executive Vice President at Costco, and I have responsibility for a number of different areas, including HR and risk management, construction and marketing and membership. But of course, recently I've been most engaged in, I feel like it's the Department of the Coronavirus and all things related to that. So that's me. I don't know, is that it, Katie?
That's wonderful.
Good.
Thank you. And Teresa?
Hi, I've been here before, so nice to sort of not see you again. I'm Teresa Hudson. I lead the HR legal team at Microsoft. Normally, I sort of practice employment law, and my team does immigration as well, but have found myself kind of at the intersection of HR and policy work, both internal and external to the company in the midst of this pandemic.
Thank you. Terrific. And Ephraim, can you share with us your role in your business?
Well, as a small business, I do it all. So I've been really trying to stay on top of the new guidelines and really trying to stay on top of all the changing elements that are necessary for our business. And so really kind of playing it on all fronts, as well as kind of handling the finances, making sure that we're doing well on those sides, and making sure that our sourcing, I mean, really it's the whole gamut. But at this point in time, a lot of it has been really focused on COVID and implementation of processes inside of our business.
Terrific. Thank you. And just to give a shout out to your name of your business.
Boon Boona Coffee.
Okay, thank you. Terrific. And Tiffany, are you with us?
I am. My name is Tiffany DeHaan, and I am the Managing Director at Alaska Airlines in our people team, and I support our culture, our leadership development, our D&I work, and all of HR communications. And I think similar to Patrick, my life has been engulfed with all things COVID, and so I've sort of stepped into the return to office work and a lot of other initiatives we have related to COVID. So it's been a little bit expanded, but my focus is all around people.
Terrific. Thank you very much. So I thought I would put a question out to each of you, and maybe we can start with, we'll do Teresa, Tiffany, Ephraim, and Pat. There's a lot of mixed sentiment out there about returning to the workplace right now. And I would be interested to hear from each of you what your experience is about with your employees and customers' comfort levels at the moment right now. And then also some of the key things that your organizations have done, you think, that have had the biggest impact in making both employees and customers feel safe.
Yeah, so I'll start. We're not really focused on in-person customers at this point, largely because the customer visits aren't happening and our retail operations are still closed mostly. But there's a wide range of things we're sort of hearing from employees about kind of what they're feeling and needing right now. And we've spent a lot of time trying to understand it, surveying employees, trying to get a sense of what's worrying them, what they want. Do they want to return to the work site? Do they want to continue to work from home? And it's a really wide range. Some people are really ready to come back. They have terrible internet connection at home. They have children climbing on their heads, and they're just ready. They would like to be back in the office. Other people really need to hear from us that they don't have to come back. They can't come back because they're worried about their health, or they are worried about their children who may be climbing on their heads. So we're trying to do a lot of communicating, really reassuring people. We're fortunate that our workforce can continue to work from home, really reassuring people that they can continue to work from home. And then for the people who want to come back, we're doing a lot of communication about what steps we'll take to keep the workplace safe, and also to really help them understand that they're not coming back to the workplace they left. So there will be a lot less kind of socializing in the hallway, to the extent that's what they're coming back for. We're saying that's not the right reason, because you shouldn't be doing that. So really, really, really focusing on communications and making sure employees know what to expect so they can make informed choice.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, similar. I mean, there's such a wide range of where people are. I mean, you have people sort of saying, I'm not comfortable leaving sort of my house until there's a vaccine. And then you have people, especially in our team, because we're so customer service oriented, networking is a big thing. Our culture is very face-to-face and collaborative, saying, I'm ready to come back. And so I think it's just sort of, there's a lot of complexity around that. And then just, for our frontline folks, our flight attendants and our pilots and our CSAs, they've been sort of in the middle of this from the beginning. And the first thing we did, which I thought was really important, is we used sort of our UW professional health professionals to schedule calls that they could get on and ask all of their questions. So it was sort of from a health basis and from also an Alaska basis, but really making sure that they felt comfortable and could ask those questions of a healthcare provider and experts. So I think that really helped with getting our employees safe to come in. And then we've just sort of evolved, and we've posted obviously things on our website about how we're keeping our employees and our customers safe. And in that, I think that's been really important, because obviously we're hoping that people that need to and are comfortable will still fly, although that's dropped significantly, as but I think, we've made in-flight service changes to keep people safe. We've, blocked the middle seat. We've done several things around masks. You guys know masks are now required at the airport. Starting next week. We've done that for our employees, but that's all been sort of a little evolutionary. And so I think the key has been for us to really listen to our employees, similar to what Teresa said, is like keeping that conversation going and sort of really listening and acting and responding and making sure that we're really clear and engaging our leaders and helping them to help people feel safe as they can, and just acknowledging that, it is a really uncomfortable situation and it's hard, and their well-being is what's important, and just staying true to our values throughout that. So it's been a dynamic process, but we've just really, it's hard because and everything changes constantly. And so it's like one day it's this, the next day it's that. And how do you stay agile enough to be able to change through that? So.
Yeah, well, you guys have done a terrific job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ephraim?
Yeah, well, first, I forgot to mention, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the panel, honestly, really to be able to speak from the voice of a small business owner. And, most of us are probably in a similar position where we're doing a lot of learning on the fly. And when it comes to communicating with our employees and our team and making sure that they feel comfortable, honestly, it was only in the last week that we were able to bring most of our team back into our place of business. And so that in doing so, there was a lot that we had to make sure we had in place, all the PPE requirements that were necessary. And then additionally, the conversations with our team to make sure that they feel comfortable to come back and that they're going to apply the new guidelines. Now, we're fortunate in that they were all excited. I have a team of 15 employees, and so relatively small in comparisons to most, but that team is very important to me, and their safety, their health is really important. But knowing that they wanted to come back and that they were willing to that they were understanding of what it is that they needed to apply and how we were going to best move forward with those new guidelines. Additionally was the honesty and the conversations that we had to have about how they're feeling health-wise, checking in on them on a day-to-day basis. making sure that they feel good enough to come into work. And so those conversations have been happening. I think there was also a component about the customer side. The customer side, we still do to go and curbside. So people come up to the front of our doors, they can't enter into our place of business, but just in that interaction there, in the conversation we've had with our guests, a lot, I'd say it's 50-50. 50% of them are wearing masks and really being cautious. And then another 50% are really like, oh, this, what's going on, and still trying to make sense of things. Which leads to other things further down, trying to implement these rules with our guests, that as we get into the different phases, how does that take place, is going to be really interesting as well. But a lot of it has been just staying on top of communicating with our team as frequent as possible.
Thank you. See, and Pat?
Sure, thanks, Katie. So I think I'll break my answer into two, in terms of the comfort levels. I'll break it into two parts. So first, in our retail locations, we've been open all along. So employees and our customers, who we call members, are really getting pretty used to the new environment with all the changes that we made. And I won't detail them all here, but anybody who's been in our Costco recently has seen a lot of different changes that we've made in the name of safety. But it's almost like because we're getting used to the changes, one concern is that we continue to stay consistent with it, and we don't get complacent. I mean, both employees and our member customers. For example, just because we're all wearing masks doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be keeping our distance, and doesn't mean we shouldn't be washing our hands. So really, it's just kind of that continued regularity of the new environment, I think, is going to be important in our retail locations. And of course, by contrast, in our corporate and regional offices, we've mostly been work from home. And so in the offices, senior leadership has been present, and some key people have been back to support the business, but most employees are working from home. So what we've done is we've started the process of communicating to them all the changes that we've made at the offices that they haven't yet seen. Things like masks and daily screenings and distancing, kind of along the lines of, when you come back to the offices, here's what you're going to see. And we started conversations with the employees and surveys to get a sense, like Teresa said, get a sense of what employees are feeling as they think about coming back. I think there's a decent amount of trust in us, in leadership, because in the efforts, because leadership has been on site from the beginning. But every situation is different. Some employees are really eager to return to the offices. Some are concerned about their safety. Some are worried about their childcare, and some honestly just like working from home. So we definitely know it's going to be a process.
Thank you. Along those same lines, I'd love to hear from each of you some of the practical realities that you've faced, things that you perhaps assumed that you had figured out, and then once you got working on it, realized something was or wasn't working, and maybe a little bit of real life color that you've experienced, and perhaps also some insights from that. So maybe we can start with Teresa. And I realize you're working your way back there.
Yeah. So interestingly, we have operations in something like 120 countries. We are mostly, I think we're only open right now in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. And we have really, really, really extensive checklists to reopen. And I think that's been really helpful. The thing I didn't anticipate is that there would be places that were ready to open for economic reasons, even where the health indicators would show that maybe it's not quite time. And so we have had to do a little bit of work to make sure that area leaders, local leaders, understand that we will only open where the health indicators say it's okay to. And so, like, for example, in Georgia, we aren't going to open our Atlanta office until the health indicators are good there, even if the governor is comfortable opening up the state. So we had to get really clear on that. I think the other thing is we were all really ready to reopen by May 1st. And so we're surprised. So we did a lot of work where we were rushing in April to get ready to reopen. So it was kind of hurry up and wait. And then you have a lot of time to revisit your plans. And whenever you have time to revisit your plans, you have time to rewrite your plans. So we're kind of redoing some work that maybe doesn't need to be done. But I think really we're just slowing down more than anything. And the only places where we've opened are places where, despite all the news out of China, the number of confirmed cases in Beijing is actually very low. So that's because they reacted quickly and they have a much more involved government. So the cases are really low. There was a lot that was implemented there that we were using. Temperature checks were required, but people get their temperature. We were doing estimates to say, like, how many temperature checks get taken, temperatures are taken per day in the city of Beijing. We were estimating like 40 million, because you get tested before you walk into an office building, you get tested before you walk into your compound. And so some of that stuff we've had to adjust, where we would want to like lift and shift to the United States, for example, it just won't work. It's a different culture, it's a different government. And so we've had to sort of take lessons we can where we can, and then adjust them to local culture and legal frameworks and stuff like that.
Terrific. And I'm going to apologize in advance. It's part of the joys of COVID working from home, as it appears that my neighbor is mowing his lawn at the moment. So if you hear it in the background, I will mute for the answers. Tiffany, maybe can you share some of your key learnings that you've all found at Alaska?
Yeah, I think I just think the nimbleness of being able to continue to change as things change and adjust, and the feedback that we're getting from sort of customers and employees and being able to do that. The other thing is we're a highly unionized environment. So there's a lot of complexity in that. And so I think just sort of kind of coming together and figuring out sort of those processes and checklists and some of the stuff Teresa was talking about to sort of be really consistent, really clear. But the communication across all of that, is broken down and different for each of those different work groups. So we've really just had to double down on our communications and what that looks like. But it's just so dynamic. We're across, 115 different, stations across a lot of different states, and those have changed and what the requirements are. And so I think that just being nimble and being able to adjust to that, and being having sort of a really core group of people that we have in our command center, similar to how we would respond to any safety issue that we would have, are just coming together and making sure people and resources are available to do that. But it's taken an army, and we've just really remained dedicated to it. But it's evolving, and it's you don't have all the answers. Nobody's ever been through this before, and so it's sort of, you take some guesses and you keep safety and people top of mind. But we've had to roll things back and we've had to roll things forward. And we were going to go do temperature checks at the airport, and then the TSA decided they wanted to sort of think through that. And so it's a little bit of shift in movement, and we've just had to stay nimble and committed through the whole point. And I think the key is just to keep our values and our people just forefront of any decision we make. We always double check and test that. So it's not emotive. It's not sort of anything outside of what we should be doing. But yeah, it's just a dynamic environment. There's so much, and it changes all the time. So I think you have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that. Could you, just as a follow-up to that for you and for Pat and for Ephraim as well, any other insights about assumptions related to customers? Because you all three are customer-facing organizations, or member-facing organizations, and any kind of related assumptions and changes that have been made there. Tiffany, as just as a follow-up to your question.
Yeah, I think that we've been trying to really stay close to our customers. One of the things that we do is that all our executives call a handful of our customers each month to get feedback and see where they're at, to help inform what we do. So we do all the surveys and all of that, but we also do reach outs and just say, hey, where are you? How are you doing? What are your concerns? What can we do better? Have you seen our safety videos and some of the stuff that we're doing online? Because we've really tried to create a good forum for our customers to feel comfortable with that and build some confidence around safety and inform that and make sure they're aware of some of the things we're doing from a loyalty perspective. People are like, am I going to get to keep my status? Lounges are closed. Can I, and some of that, and just figuring out sort of how do we keep them at the forefront of those decisions. But it's that listening and acting and just sort of staying in front of it and anticipating. One of the things we've been doing is a day in the life of. So like really sort of like taking, like, I get up, I go to the airport, I get in my car, I get out, I go to the kiosk, and really what are the touch points and what are the things people might be concerned about in that process? And how do we put in stopgaps or safety things that people can then feel more comfortable along that route that we can actually fill the gaps for. So just been trying to really be intentional and then double check and then fix them as we go. And we've implemented a lot of things along the way. So
thank you. And Pat, can you share with us the same experience for you all with your employees and customers?
Sure. I guess I have maybe two examples of unexpected obstacles, and they both kind of relate to our member customers. So in our retail locations, it's been interesting to see how good intentions on behalf of Costco sometimes are not as well received as you think. For example, if you try to do something good or do something helpful for certain groups, like we've done senior shopping hours and we've done priority access for first responders, and it's been well intentions, but groups that are not included in those preferred groups tend to object to the preferential treatment. So we've had some of that. And by the way, that's not a reason for us not to do what we think is right, but sort of like be prepared for consequences beyond what the intention was. The other thing I'll mention too, and it's received some publicity, is our mandating of masks for our customers, and we expected that to be a challenge. First for employees. So we mandated masks for employees beginning, I think it was first part of April. And the challenge that we expected was more of a supply issue, because at the time we wanted, of course we needed to make sure we had enough masks every day for every employee. But the supply issue really isn't much of a concern now, and it's been, mostly well received by employees. And then with customers, since the first part of May, there was a lot of feedback that we got from our customers when we first announced the policy requiring masks to come into Costco. And at first, the comments were mostly negative, sometimes angry, people talking about infringement of personal freedoms and liberties, et cetera. But pretty quickly, it shifted positive, and it really hasn't been much of a problem. And so that was an unexpected, nice thing. And I think, by the way, that it helps that we're a membership club. We've got lots of rules of membership, and this is another rule that we say that our members, at least for now, need to honor under the circumstances. So anyway, those are just two examples where we've been, attending to the voices and the needs of our members.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And Ephraim, what are you finding?
Well, on two sides for us. So internally on our team side, there's some things that we do at the roastery surrounding sensory analysis and being able to cup coffee and being able to, it's no different than wine tasting and making sure that your product tastes good, and you're doing it, it's very much dipping the same spoon into a cup with multiple people, and there's a lot of germs being shared, and that's been the case, and that's always been kind of the standard for the coffee industry. But we had to make sure that we were applying the appropriate steps, and we reached out to the SCA, which is the Specialty Coffee Association, to learn about how best to apply cupping and sensory analysis to make sure we're still putting out a good product, but in a safe manner. And the reception from the team, I thought, would be a little bit difficult. Hey, this is how we're going to have to start cupping, and this is how we're going to do it from now on. But it worked out really well, and that goes for other things as well. Other processes, whether it's masks, frequency of hand washing, which was there, but to increase it, and just also really being honest about where they're feeling at health wise. And so all of the things that I thought would have been difficult, from making sure that my team was applying and willing to flex to these new changes, they were really willing to do, and I was really grateful for that. Where I thought would be easy but became a little bit more of a struggle was, now we're about 2 months since I think since we entered phase 1 under Governor Inslee's mandate, the new guidelines. But prior to it, I think it was a few days, maybe a week or so before, we had to reduce our capacity by 50%, and there were things that we needed to apply. Making sure that we kept 6 feet, kept guests within 6 feet, whether in line, and our line can get pretty busy and pretty long, and they're coming in as groups. And so to enforce those with our guests was probably the thing that I didn't see it being as much of a challenge, but became a challenge. And additionally, in a space, even in our roastery, which is about 3,000 square feet, there's tons of space. It occupies about 90 people, but it allows for occupancy of 90 people. But, you know, groups would gather and they would move around. And so that 6 feet rule would constantly be broken. And even now, we kind of move into the end of May and the potential of going into phase 2, you know, my thoughts are running forward into what that looks like for our business. How do we keep our guests safe? How do we keep our team safe? How do we respect everyone's wishes of being able to enjoy themselves and, you know, move around, but at the same time, you know, applying the rules that we need to apply for everyone's health.
It's a significant task, especially for a sole entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Teresa, I'd like to circle back to you on the legal side, which I know you've spent quite a bit of time on, and we've had many a discussion. Can you talk a little bit about the regulation and what business owners are going to need to think about, particularly as it relates to this whole notion of screening? And you know, what procedures, and I'm not asking you to espouse legal advice, but just in your experience for Microsoft, the kinds of things that you all have been thinking about the need to put in place and how you're addressing that.
Yeah, so I think maybe the first question is what must you do? And so far we haven't seen regulations, you know, that say you must, you know, take temperature, like at sort of, at least broadly, you must take temperatures, you must do self-attestations. That is, you do have to in China, that's actually required in China. But in the United States, we haven't seen any sort of baseline you must. The next question is what can you do? And we have seen the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, relax some of its prior rules and allow for things like temperature checks if people want to do them. Some employers are testing, you know, COVID-19 testing. Mostly where I've heard people doing that, there is a particularized need. So frontline healthcare workers, I've heard of, you know, like oil companies before they send people out on an oil rig. So you can see that there might be a particularized desire to make sure that people are not, they haven't been infected. So we have not decided to do any of those things. We are instead doing a self-attestation that just walks people through a series of questions. Some of them are health related, some of them are not, which is actually part of how we have stayed compliant. So there are two different parts of it. One is what questions do we ask? We've asked questions about symptoms and exposure. You know, have you been diagnosed? Do you know anybody who's been diagnosed? Have you traveled in the last period of time? You know, are you willing to socially distance once you're in our office? So we were really deliberate in adding some questions in there that were not related to health. And so we could, you know, to the extent somebody sort of passed or failed, because you get a daily certificate if you answer all the questions in the right way, we wouldn't know on what basis if somebody was denied a daily certificate. So that's one of the ways we're just trying to be really careful with the information because it can be very sensitive. We're also not collecting or storing the data. It's really a questionnaire that you walk through and then you then get a sort of certificate that then allows you to go into the office. It's another way we're doing that to kind of make sure we're being super privacy protective and not storing data that we really shouldn't have or don't want to have on a daily basis. So, you know, this is another place we'll continue to evolve. I think, you know, to the earlier points about flexibility, I think regulations will become more will change. Different countries, so to the extent people are operating in more than the United States, different countries have much stricter privacy requirements. We're going to run into some issues in Germany with our self-attestation app, for example, but this will require a lot of agility because it will continue to change.
Thank you very much. And now, Pat, I'd like to hear from you. You know, everyone is thinking about how to rearrange their facilities. At Costco, you've had to be malleable and do this while staying open. What are some of the important facilities changes that you've made and that you're thinking about? And can you speak to also how you've made these decisions and the process that you've taken for adjusting them as you've gone along?
Sure, be happy to. So we've made a lot of changes in our retail locations, and for us, a lot of the changes were put in place in March, when which seems like a long time ago. But so our volumes in the early weeks of this crisis our volumes were crazy. You know, there were so many people stockpiling, hoarding supplies. So the important changes that we did back then were all in the name of crowd control and distancing. I think that those are the most important ones. You know, things like putting maximum capacities on entry to the warehouses, to our retail locations, and eliminating, you know, non-essentials and places that people would gather, like our food sample demos, like our jewelry, like our road shows, which are our special events. Limiting our food court offerings, you know, taking the tables out of the food courts, you know, those kind of like strip it down to the bare minimum, to reduce, you know, and again in the name of crowd control. And then also some visible reminders to people, like, you know, the banners and the floor decals. And, you know, in the normal course, we don't like banners. We like really clean warehouses. But we've done some things, you know, to be visual reminders about distancing that have been important. For us, I don't think it's any one, you know, single thing. Like the plexiglass, you know, at the check stands has been, you know, of note. But I don't think it's any single thing that's important. It's almost like it's the cumulative effect that employees and members see, that they just appreciate the fact that as they look around them, it's been like, this is a good place. You know, Costco's kind of working with us on this. But I'd also say, you know, just as importantly as kind of those visible changes, we made some really important changes, particularly early on, to acknowledge what employees were doing, and that these are not normal times, and we appreciate their hard work during these abnormal times. So again, back in March, when the volumes and the traffic in our locations was really crazy, we let employees know that our communities were depending upon us. They relied upon us to stay open, and, you know, continue to supply them with food and water and cleaning supplies and other essentials. And that was important for employees to be able to hear that. It wasn't just the profit motive. This was, you know, we're an essential part of our communities. And so, you know, we wanted to recognize, like, acknowledge that, but also recognize the employees by way of an hourly premium that we paid them and continue to pay them, and manager bonuses that started in March and will continue through May. You know, we hired some temporary employees to give regular staff a break from the overtime that they were working. And then we took some steps, like I think others have too, to make sure that we were giving, like, taking care of our higher risk population, giving additional time off and that sort of thing. So again, kind of the cumulative effect of all this, but it's like, I want to underscore that that acknowledgement to employees, because that really meant a lot to them to like hear from leadership, like, we get it, we understand these are abnormal times. And then quickly, in terms of how decisions are made within Costco, it's been really, I'm not surprised, but I've been impressed at the involvement of our CEO and the cooperation, like true cooperation between our senior operators across the country. So, you know, they're not the only ones with the ideas here. You know, they come from all over, they come from employees and, you know, all over the world. But the operators realize that we can't have vastly different standards for different states, you know, except where we need to comply with, you know, state mandates. But they needed to be consistent. And so they established a series of daily calls, which are now less frequent, but daily calls to discuss ideas and develop a uniform set of temporary operating procedures, which go on for pages and pages, but they're uniform across the country. So I've noticed that, you know, consistency and cooperation and communication have been absolutely critical to the decision-making process. It's been great, actually.
It's terrific, thank you. And toilet paper volumes return to normal yet, or still TBD?
Well, we keep hearing from our merchants that we don't have there's no supply issue, there's a demand issue. And we're getting better in terms of out of stocks on, you know, toilet paper and, you know, paper good and cleaning supplies. But honestly, we're not, you know, the demand is still, you know, quite heavy.
Got it, excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, Tiffany, one of the things that I was really struck with when we spoke, and this is just true of your company overall, is the really remarkable culture at Alaska Airlines. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to how you see that shine through during this pandemic, and what guidance you have for employers in order to do this and to really help their culture come through during this time.
Yeah, I think that's a big question. Thank you. I think a lot of what Patrick said, just around sort of helping them to understand how important they are to the infrastructure of the nation and how they do help medical workers and they do help cargo and supplies. We serve very rural areas of Alaska, the state of Alaska, that without us, they don't have food or any essential things. And so I think just having them really stay focused and understand why it's so important to what they're doing and being able to really feel a lot of pride in that. We do a lot of celebrating around some of the stuff we're doing around the cargo and the delivery of PPE supplies. And we've been giving away our fruit and cheese platters. I don't know if you guys saw that this week, to healthcare workers, and just some of the really great things that we as an airline can do to support our community during this time, even though the passengers that they love so much are not here. And people just have so much pride. Our employees, they love this airline. They work here because it's a great brand, and they love their customers and they're missing them. And I think that's really due to, we have really strong values, and I know I keep going back to that, but it's really, really, really important to us. And we guide with those, and we keep them at the forefront, sort of it's safety, it's doing the right thing, it's, delivering performance and being remarkable and all of those things. And I think similar to what Patrick did, we have a sort of our group that comes together, and there's daily emails that go out to us as a leadership team. But we also have daily emails that go out to all of our employees. That one is letting people know what's happening from an industry perspective, what's happening in our company, both things that they need to be aware of, like the new mask regulations, but also great stories. We have some great things to celebrate. Like a lot of our employees are doing really cool things in the communities, writing letters to seniors. They're going and supporting different state hospitals and just doing things on their own. We've delivered a bunch of our food that was obviously not being supported within each of the stations. So I think we've just really tried to celebrate our people too along the way and just thank them and sort of have a lot of gratitude for that. And I think the key through all of this is how much leadership matters. We've really tried to help people to say, hey, you know what, you sharing your vulnerabilities about your fears or how challenging things are, that my kids keep interrupting me too. It humanizes the fact that we're all in this together, and that if you can just have that conversation and know that the well-being matters, it's not just a matter of processes and policies and all of that. It's like, we're human and we're all in this together. And I, as a leader, have an obligation to have those conversations and drive trust that I'm going to make decisions that are in the best interest of them, and that they feel safe coming to me and say, I don't feel safe, or can we try this? And there's not going to be something that's going to be a barrier to that. And I think, it starts at the top. And I think, even just our middle management, meeting our planes every time they come in and thanking our, pilots and flight attendants for, coming to work every day and being really inspired to do it, and treating our guests with the utmost care and doing that well in such a pandemic. And so I think we've just really tried to celebrate those moments. And I think having that well-being sort of support, vulnerability, trust, and just use this as opportunity to just enhance your culture. You have such an opportunity just to take all the great things you do and amplify it. And people are at the center of everything. And I think we've done that really well. I mean, it's not like it's been perfect, but supplies, to Patrick's point, were a challenge in the beginning. We had them, but they were going away because they were in such demand. And people didn't know where to find them. And we had them, and we were sourcing from all over different countries to get stuff. And, there was a challenging road to, hoe for a little while, but I think we've done a remarkable job, and our people are just, they're in it. They love this airline. They want it to come back. They want it to be great. They love what they do. And, travel is an important element for all of us, right? It connects people to families, gives people opportunities to go and do really great things. And we miss that, so we all miss that. And they're at the forefront of that. So yeah, it's been, but my advice would be leadership matters, lean into it, keep your values and who you are up front, and, share some vulnerabilities and create really good communications. And it's not just emails, it's conversations.
Fair enough. Well, and I also want to point out here, what's truly remarkable in all the things that you've said is that as a business, the tremendous revenue pressure that Alaska has faced, and yet even with all of that incredible hardship, the keeping of the culture of reaching out and providing back to the community and still continuing to do all the amazing support things that you all are doing, I think speaks volumes for that very culture. So thank you.
Yeah.
Ephraim, can you share with us as well? You have a different perspective than all the other executives on the panel. You are a business owner and as you point out, of a different size, and you are in the trenches as well. So
Yeah.
also congratulations and good work for all that I'm sure you've had to navigate with a very different size team to sort it all out. How would you advise others, small businesses, to balance all the complexities that need to be navigated in this time? It can seem daunting.
Yeah, you're right. It can be daunting. I think being very well organized is key in this process. The first thing that I think about is honestly is what are bigger companies doing? So looking to my friends, Costco, Alaska Airlines, Microsoft, Teresa, Tiffany, Pat, I'm looking at them and saying, okay, what processes are they implementing? What is it that they're doing? Obviously not the same scale, not anywhere, but if there are things that I see that I can apply that would, would satisfy the rules and the guidelines and the safety and the health of my team and my guests, and I see someone doing it well, I'm going to try applying those. No need to reinvent the wheel. Look to others who have done it faster and better, and apply those things. That's one thing. The second one, staying on top of those guidelines is really important. Make friends with public health, with Department of Health. Make friends with folks at ESD, Employment Security Department. Reach out to your congressional leaders, to your city officials, to your chamber. Get the support from those that know or have resources or sources to provide some answers and guidance. I think that's very important. In that same tone, I also would stress the fact that a lot of small businesses are owned by individuals that are still learning English, where English is their second language. And so if I'm at a disadvantage as a small business trying to get to sources and resources, how much more so would someone who is Spanish as their first language, or Vietnamese? And so those things are very important. And so finding those resources and making those resources available in multiple languages is really important. Number three, I would say dialogue amongst your team, learning from your employees. What have they seen? What are they learning? What is it that they'd feel comfortable with? What is it that you feel comfortable with? Having these open conversations are really important, because there is so much that they provide from guidance and just information that, having a narrow focus, you may not be able to see all those things. And so relying on your team is very important. And fourth, if the assumptions of what's, going to be the case with small businesses, losing such a big percentage of them in the next 6 months is true, really the financial health of your business is really important as a small business owner, to really stay on top of it. And what that means is obviously, how you're generating revenue, but how does your balance sheet look? What are you doing to mitigate, having huge debt burden you, whether, today, but, 6 months, a year from now, when we're still getting out of the trenches of this. And so really keeping an eye out on, your balance sheet and cash on hand, saving as much of that cash and retaining it, and really being very thoughtful about how you go about spending your money is going to be very important for a small business at this time. And then, of course, just being, creative with generating revenue as well. Going to online platforms, going to other sources. There are many things that can help if you have the luxury, I would say the luxury, to be agile. In some cases, in small businesses, they don't have the agility, because for whatever reason, financial means or whatever the case may be. But if you have the means to look and see how you can be agile in this time, but while keeping a close eye on your numbers. As we're getting ready for the second phase and the third phase, with the guidelines that we're being asked to implement, would that require a full-time staff now being able to enforce and make sure that these things are happening? There is a cost to revenue, there's a balance to it all. And so, those types of thoughts have to be put into place as well, as to when you open up, how you open up, and what you'll do with that next phase. So, yeah.
That's a lot. Thank you for sharing all of that. We wanted to preserve as much time as we could for everybody to ask questions, so I will go on mute now. And I think, Sadia, you are back with us again to help with the questions.
I'm back. Thank you. It was so wonderful to hear just all of the perspectives of these businesses as we're all navigating this. There are a couple questions from participants that I think maybe, Teresa, I will direct to you. So you were talking, I believe, about the daily certificates and such that your company is doing. Are you guys aware of any sites or software that can be implemented for other businesses to be able to do that, or any hints around that?
Yeah, this is one of the joys of working at Microsoft. When you talk about resources, it sort of feels like a wealth of resources. And so we have people who are willing to create these apps for us, which is what we've been using so far. But we've actually been talking with another company, United Health Group, who is developing an app that I think they will deploy more broadly for other companies to use. And so we're working with them to see whether we can, kind of marry up their system and our system so that other people could use what we have. So not yet, but I think soon.
Great. And also in that vein, how do companies balance the need with trying to assist in the contact tracing that we know is so important from a public health perspective, but also not wanting to hold on to people's health records, as you had mentioned?
Yeah, I think you probably don't need people's health records to help with a contact tracing investigation. Basically, when the contact tracers come and talk to you, when they talk to somebody, they want to know where they've been and who they've been in contact with. That assumes that they've had a positive diagnosis at some point. So that diagnosis is likely held elsewhere with their doctor, wherever they got their test. So what is most helpful to know is who has been in your workplace and who they've been in contact with. So, customer or visitor logs, if you have people, you do that, badge access, schedules, time cards. Basically, how do you know who's been where in your building? And that's what can be most helpful, rather than people's underlying health conditions or circumstances.
Great. And I love that you point out the specific tools that probably are already in existence that can help people do that tracing of time cards and schedules and those sorts of things. Patrick, I have a question for you. What has been the biggest challenge in terms of internal communications to your employees as they are navigating this and returning or continuing to work?
Well, I think I'll echo what Tiffany was saying about leadership and making sure. Leadership matters, and making sure leadership is setting, both communicating well and setting the example. We've been trying to communicate even more than we typically do with our employees, in multiple formats, in emails and intranet on our website, and through using a employee video from our CEO. But also making sure, people have different opinions about the efficacy of some of these measures. But when it comes down to it, we have to make sure that regardless of different opinions, leadership has to be on the same page. We have to be, communicating a consistent message. So it's been, the communication has to be regular and simple and consistent, but the leadership follow-up and the setting of the example has to be really, really strong.
Yeah, that consistency, what I've heard from other organizations as well is exactly what you're saying, consistency and reinforcing on a regular basis. We're all in a situation where we're hearing things, but we probably need to hear it multiple times and have a consistent message.
So the one thing that I would add to that is that one thing we've done is created sort of one-pagers that we give weekly to our supervisors and above that they can actually physically print off and take, and encourage to go have conversations and connect with their people as they come off. So it's not just sort of how do I translate down, we've actually given them sort of the key talking points and made it really digestible that they can take. So I think the question is sort of like, how do you get them bought in, and then how do you give them the tools to kind of keep it sort of going down the chain? So just another thing that we're doing as well.
Yeah. I love that. I know there's so much to cover, and lots of questions will continue to come up as people are re-entering the workforce. Just would like to ask Ephraim and Tiffany, what else do you think businesses or customers should know about reopening? What words of advice do you have as we close out? So Tiffany, I'll put you on the spot first, and then hear from Ephraim, and we will close out.
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, I think stay nimble, stay agile, keep your ear to the ground, be ready to move, be ready to sort of make changes as you go. I think strong change management and the communication is really important too. So I think we all don't know the right answer to any of this. Leverage your resources, reach out, look. I mean, we're all doing the same thing that all of you guys are doing too. We don't have all the answers. We're reaching out to our partners at Microsoft, our board members who are at different organizations. And I think we're all in this together. And I think we're going to have to go slow to make sure we do this right and we don't put our people at risk. And there's no reason to go fast.
Yeah, everything Tiffany just said, I mean, honestly, that was well put. I mean, the only thing I would add for small businesses to really consider, if you're opening up in phases, what does that look also from a financial cost to you as well? And being able to make sure that you can absorb that. So if you are opening up your business for 50% more folks to come into it, we're making sure that that revenue that you're generating from that can cover the cost also to do all the things that you need to do as well from a PPE perspective, whether it's, offering gloves, masks and such, all those things that need to be put in place. There is a cost, but be thoughtful in how you go about it, just so that you're not burdening yourself financially. Because otherwise, what in my case as a small business I'm considering even doing is that here we are getting ready for possibly a phase 2. But what I may do is just stay at phase 1 approach of this, wait a few more weeks, maybe give it about a month, see if there's anything that I can learn from anyone that's doing this 50% capacity in their business, apply that, make sure I'm ready for it, and then move forward. And so giving myself some time to react. Yeah.
That's great advice. Well, thank you guys all so much for your time today and your insights. Special thanks to Madrona Venture Group also for putting together this panel and this content and really curating that toolkit. We've heard a lot about the importance of communication and tools, and that toolkit has some really great examples, some things that you can use and put together very easily. So I highly encourage everyone to take some time and put that to work for you. I also just wanted to mention about that toolkit. Katie was telling us at the beginning of this that that's being updated on a regular basis. We know that we're in this constantly changing world. And so, knowing that, that's not something that was put out a few weeks ago and it's already changed, but things are constantly being updated. So thank you so much, Katie, for all of the work that you guys are doing to help equip your own portfolio companies as well as the community at large. Thank you to the Seattle Metro Chamber and to Business Health Trust and Symetra for putting this together. And we will see you hopefully next time for our We Got This WA webinar series. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.